Facing live ammunition fire, rubber bullets, tear gas, and more water cannon, the anti-coup protesters defied a ban and headed out to the streets in their thousands for a fourth straight day. The military junta has barred any gathering of more than 5 people and imposed a curfew in many areas from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. Undeterred and determined from many walks of life, the protesters still came out.
If the civil disobedience movement accelerates in the country as a whole, the government machinery will stop. Not only the lawyers, I hope all the people will join the movement. We must not lose, and nor is a draw acceptable. We must win. That is why we are on the street now.
In Yangon, police prepared for the protesters in the early hours. There were 2 main areas in Myanmar's largest city where they gathered, by City Hall and a large intersection near the University of Yangon. In the country's second largest city, Mandalay, thousands of protesters faced water cannon and at least 27 people were arrested. International condemnation of the coup has grown over the last few days. New Zealand, the first country to go a step further.
New Zealand is suspending all high-level political and military contact with Myanmar. Minister Mahuta has also directed that New Zealand's aid program to Myanmar should not include projects that are delivered with or benefit the military government. We've also agreed to implement a travel ban to be formalised in the coming week on Myanmar's military leaders.
Further international action is expected. After a request by Britain and the EU, the United Nations Human Rights Council will hold a special session on the February 1st coup and all that's been happening in Myanmar since. Scott Heidler, Al Jazeera.
Earlier, I spoke to Chris SIDOTI, who's a co-author of the reports, The Economic Interests of the Myanmar Military. He's also a former expert member of the UN International Independent Fact-Finding Mission on Myanmar. He says economic sanctions may be one of the few ways foreign countries can influence the military.
The military has always been interested in maximising the income of the individual generals at the top and more broadly funding military operations. They take around 12 to 13% of the state budget in Myanmar, so there's a lot of money going into the military from the state budget. But they increase their take through all of these business enterprises, and they're enriching themselves through it. Sanctions are important, though, because the military feels the pressure of economic isolation. There's no doubt about that. And so the decision announced last week by the Japanese company Kirin to withdraw from a joint venture with the military in Myanmar's largest brewery is a very important decision. Kirin had previously stopped paying dividends to the military and now has announced it will withdraw from the joint venture. This kind of pressure is absolutely essential at this time, now that the military has retaken control of the state. The pressure is mounting, and the pressure is on the military directly and on its partners to cut off the dollars, to cut off supplies. There are very few ways in which we can influence events in Myanmar, but what is happening at the moment is a tragedy, and the very least we can do is to stop funding the military.
Well, let's now bring in KYAW, who's the Executive Director of the Burma Human Rights Network. He's via Skype from London. Thank you very much for joining us. So we're seeing this growing protest movement in Myanmar, a lot of defiance. Yes. Ultimately, what are the protesters trying to achieve? Is it to return to the past agreements between the military and civilian government, or is there something else that they want to see happen now?
What the people are asking is to abolish the 2008 constitution, because this is the constitution which drafted by the military in order to maintain the power into their grip. So we will never get any genuine democracy as long as the military control the power. So we want genuine democracy. We don't like that 2008 constitution. We want to abolish this 2008 constitution, and we want the federal government. You know, all the equal right for all the minorities and ethnic minorities and religious minorities.
New Zealand, so far, is the only country to be warning and to be seen to take action against the military. Other Western countries have condemned, of course, this coup. The UN, United Nations also, but they haven't yet taken strong measures. It's been more than a week now since this coup. What do you make of that? Are you disappointed by this lack of strong action so far from the international community?
We are constantly advocating in the international community to take serious action against the military, especially targeted sanction on economic interests of the military, such as the companies and their cronies. So it is important that the international community need to take immediate step to take the action against the military, because if this step has been taken, the military will realize that in the long term they are going to be suffer, because they are relying on this economic their businesses and their companies on their cronies. So once these sanctions are imposed on these entities, and this is the key, for them to rely upon this. So the international community immediately take action now, and the peoples are expecting the international community, because the ASEAN countries and European Union and US and UK and people having great hope on the international community, and we urge them to stand up with the people of Burma this time.
Does the protest movement want to see Aung San Suu Kyi return as a leader? There's been a lot of criticism of her outside of Myanmar, of course, because of her lack of, what is seen as her lack of action on the Rohingya issue, on the Rohingya crisis. Do the people of Myanmar want her back in power?
A majority of people want her to lead, but there are some mixed feeling now, because as long as 2008 constitution exists, we never have any genuine democracy. So I think this is the key matter, key factor. Even Aung San Suu Kyi also want to change. So she will definitely will agree with this point, and that's why everyone is asking to abolish the 2008 constitution, to finish the military rule in Burma, and to have the federal government.
Thank you very much, Mr. KYAW Win, for speaking to us. KYAW Win is the Executive Director of the Burma Human Rights Network, joining us there from London. Thank you very much for your time.
Also.